The world is shocked by the possibility that 1 million Russian servicemen have died in Ukraine. What caused this tragedy? Let's investigate the Kremlin's inexplicable actions and their effects on millions. Which strategies will boost numbers? Discover the forgotten stories of this fight with us. Losses chilling reality. Russia's enormous losses are becoming unavoidable. The Kremlin remains mute, but rising graves across Russia tell a grim story. Russia has spent $2.5 million expanding graves in 2023, a gruesome sign of the war's true human cost. It's twice the 2022 spending and 6 times the 2020 spending, but the worst is yet to come. Given current numbers, researchers expect Russia's soldier losses to reach 1 million by 2025. Consider that 1 million soldiers died. The last nation to see such devastation was during World War II, which changed the world. Russia is approaching this sad milestone in a war Putin refuses to end, driving his country farther into the abyss. Growing casualties. The conflict has reached this point. How? How did one of the world's largest militaries find itself losing rapidly? As the conflict continues with unremitting efforts, soldiers and people are suffering. President Vladimir Putin's strategies cause significant problems for the nation. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces recorded 61,8962 Russian soldier losses in Ukraine as of August 28, 2024. This figure includes battlefield fatalities and inoperative personnel. According to The Economist, 3 to 4 Russian soldiers are wounded for every one killed. A secret U.S. Department of Defense paper allows for more losses. Since the invasion began on February 24, 2022, 46,000 to 72,000 Russian troops have died, been injured, or been captured in Ukraine. On that fateful February day, 19,000 soldiers entered Ukraine, far more than Putin first planned. These astonishing numbers demonstrate one thing. Ukrainian forces make the invader pay for every inch of ground taken, even at a high cost. Whether 600,000 or 72,000, this number is still a few 100,000 soldiers short of 1 million. How did the expected loss of Russian troops reach this staggering level so quickly? This question can be answered using simple math. The General Staff of Ukraine's armed forces publishes daily reports on the Ukrainian front line. Therefore, let's use these numbers. These statistics will show how many troops Russia lost in Ukraine in a week. The last report before writing this was on August 28th. On this date, Ukraine's Armed Forces General Staff reported 611,190 troop losses. Let's look at Russian troop losses in 1 week from August 21st. On August 21st, Ukraine's Armed Forces General Staff said that Russia had lost 600 to 3,010 troops since invading Ukraine. On August 22nd, the next report reported 6,440 dead soldiers. This means Russia lost 130 troops in 1 day. On August 23rd, the report showed a total loss of 605 personnel. On another day, 1,190 soldiers lost. Similar losses occurred the following day, with 1,160 casualties. Russia lost 606,490 troops. Soldier deaths rose 2420 from August 25th to 27th. The August 27th report listed 100 dead soldiers. Before authoring this video's screenplay, Russia lost 1,090 soldiers on August 27th, bringing the total to 611,190. Thus, 8,180 soldiers were lost in a week, or 1,168 a day. Assume this loss rate persists. At 1,168 troops each day, 1,000 casualties would be attained on July 26, 2025, in 332 days. If we start with U.S. Defense Department estimates and maintain the same loss rate, Russia will lose 1 million soldiers in 232 days. This gives us April 17, 2025, a dismal milestone. That matches the forecasts of experts like British defense scholar Michael Clarke. Professor Clark told Times Radio, a British digital radio station, that Russia's personnel losses could approach 1 million by 2024 due to Putin's indifference to the human cost of his deadly military war. The new British Army Chief of General Staff, General Sir Roland Walker, has even more gloomy predictions for Russian troops. General Walker estimates Putin will sacrifice 1.5 to 1.8 million people to seize Ukraine's 4 main oblasts: Donetsk, Kherson, Luhansk, and Zaporizhia. At the current pace of attrition and wounded, Russia will likely lose 1.5 million soldiers and billions of dollars in equipment to seize the 4 Ukrainian oblasts. He also questioned the rationality of such a high human cost for an unattainable and nonsensical strategic goal. General Walker said Russia should worry about more than losing 1.5 to 1.8 million people for a piece of Ukraine given the state of the world. Kremlin narrative and public awareness. It doesn't seem likely right now. Russia doesn't seem concerned about losing all these troops either, while Kremlin data suggest otherwise. Only in early 2023 did the Kremlin openly recognize its soldier deaths, and the total was almost insultingly inaccurate. Despite credible estimates of tens of thousands of Russian soldiers killed in Ukraine, the Kremlin claimed only 6,000. The difference between official Kremlin estimates and battlefield losses intensifies the misery, as propaganda and misinformation hide the true amount of human suffering. Thankfully, some Russian independent media sites have risked much to report more realistic numbers. The now-banned Mediazona editor Mikhail Golubovsky quickly disputed the 6,000 figure. Mediazona suggested that Russian military casualties could be 8 times higher than the Kremlin reported, based on new graves in Russian cemeteries, official reports, newspapers, and social media. Despite the risks of opposing Russia's official narrative, Golubovsky and other journalists reported bravely. Mediazona and Meduza reported on July 5, 2024, that 12,000 Russian troops may have been lost since the assault. This statistic matches the General Staff of Ukraine's Armed Forces assessments. The July 5th staff report projected 548580 casualties, including injuries. The Economist's statistics show that many Russian servicemen may have suffered in the fight. Putin may know the entire depth of his force's obstacles, according to a December 2023 disclosure. He doesn't care. According to exiled Russian environmental campaigner Yevgenia Chirikova, Putin appears unconcerned about the mounting number of dead and wounded on both sides. No changes will occur unless Russian forces are confronted in Ukraine. If Putin is indifferent to this huge human cost, why not report it accurately? Why not utilize it to inspire patriotism and sacrifice by portraying the war as a heroic struggle for Russia's survival? Tens of thousands of troops ago, this spin was feasible. Real figures can only backfire, showing Putin's regime's complete calamity that it has tried to hide. Sacrifice demographics. Russians, particularly those outside Moscow and St. Petersburg, are aware that their family members and neighbors are dying in Ukraine. Putin strategically avoids conscripting people from these cities to shield the urban elite from the war's direct impact, preventing criticism of his policies. The majority of Russian casualties come from contract soldiers, prisoners, reservists, and foreign recruits, as these groups face the highest death toll. The Kremlin has little sympathy for contract soldiers, who are often recruited from poor communities with financial incentives, such as a monthly salary of $2,300 and bonuses for injuries or death. Before the war, contract soldiers earned only $360 a month, but the financial struggles of many Russians made the Kremlin's offer appealing. By 2026, Russia plans to have 5,000 contract soldiers, though fulfilling these targets is likely to require even more pressure. To meet its recruitment goals, the Kremlin has resorted to coercion, forcing people into the military, much like during the Chechen Wars. Foreign recruits, including those from Sri Lanka, India, and Central Asia, were misled into joining the Russian army with promises of non-combat roles or citizenship, only to be sent to the front lines under threat of prison if they refused. Prisoner exploitation and fate. The Kremlin's recruitment strategies have been marked by misleading promises and constant regulation changes. Before the war, foreign recruits had to serve 5 years to gain Russian citizenship, but this was reduced to 1 year as Russian casualties increased. However, foreign fighters' contracts are now tied to the completion of Russia's military operation in Ukraine, with no option to cancel or expire. Similarly, Russian prisoners were initially promised a pardon after 6 months of service. But as losses mounted, many were required to serve until the war ended, receiving only sentence reductions instead of full pardons. The exploitation of desperate prisoners shows the Kremlin's ruthless tactics. Recruited by figures like Yevgeny Prigozhin, these prisoners are often sent to die within months. BBC reports that Wagner recruits live an average of 3 months in Ukraine, while those under the Russian Ministry of Defense average only 2 months. Both groups are seen as expendable, with little regard for their survival. The meat grinder strategy is central to Russia's high casualty rates, as it sends waves of soldiers into battle under artillery fire and close combat to overwhelm the enemy. This brutal attrition tactic resulted in a 25% increase in Russian casualties in the second year of the war. While the Wagner Group helped secure victories in eastern Ukraine, such as Bakhmut, it lost 22,000 soldiers in the process, illustrating the steep human cost of this approach. Unfortunately, success has led to big losses. The Kremlin is so fixated on these ephemeral successes that it continues to deploy ineffective Kharkiv techniques. In the continuing Battle of Volodar in Donetsk, the approach has failed. The Institute for the Study of War attributes the failure of Russian human wave-style assaults to difficult terrain, lack of combat power, and inability to surprise Ukrainian forces. This highlights 2 critical factors behind Russian casualties: weak fighting capability and strong Ukrainian resistance. Russian troops, often inadequately trained and poorly equipped, face significant challenges. BBC reports that many Ukrainian prisoners had to beg for basic supplies, like clothing and boots. Additionally, Russian soldiers are often sent to the front with outdated or broken weapons and no proper medical kits. Russia's military now relies on poorly trained recruits, with little distinction between soldiers other than minimal training. Putin prioritizes numbers for propaganda, but the UK Ministry of Defense calls this approach ineffective. Ukrainian forces, bolstered by strong defense, have inflicted significant losses on Russian troops, especially as Russian soldiers struggle with Ukrainian drones, artillery, and machine guns. Despite Russia's numerical advantage, its tactics are unsustainable, relying on sending troops to be sacrificed for artillery targeting. Russia's heavy reliance on outdated Soviet-era equipment, along with dwindling resources and sanctions, is exacerbated by shrinking recruitment. As the war drags on, Russia faces significant difficulties replacing losses, and its military is increasingly unable to sustain itself. The situation worsens with weather complications and stretched resources, making mobility more difficult. With sanctions and production bottlenecks, Russia is forced to rely on foreign suppliers and older equipment. The war is draining Russia's military, and troop losses continue to mount. The brutal reality is that Russia's military machine is consuming its soldiers faster than it can replenish them. This war is swallowing these guys, not simply losing battles. The scariest part? As the number of deaths nears 1 million, the Kremlin ignores the carnage and leaves a wasteland of broken men and families. What do you think of these soldiers? Do you see these people as victims of a cruel system or as combatants who chose their fate? When will 1 million troops be reached? Thanks for watching the video. Leave your comments below.